Welcome everybody. How are you doing today? It's so very nice to have you here. And today I wanted to speak a little bit about our 3-week intensive that begins on June 12th. And in this intensive, I will be speaking about the meaning of there's only one or there is no other. And also about how being relational and how the changing world provide an opportunity for us for awakening and freedom. You know, when I say being relational, because we could just say relationships, right? But then almost immediately our focus goes into our close, intimate relating. And when I say being relational, I mean, being in the world is being relational. It is not only with the people that are close to us, but we relate with everything and everybody. So being relational is a way of being in the world. And of course, it's a huge topic, relationships and being relational. And my interest is, I'm speaking about this in the context of presence and in how what comes up for us when we are relational and what comes up for us when we are interacting in the world, or how affected we are by the changes that are going on in the world. How can we use that which comes up for us for awakening, for embodiment, and for freedom? I heard before, of course, many times from many people, and I used to think that also, speaking about being relational, that sometimes we say, I'm fine, I'm okay when I'm alone, when I'm physically alone, when I'm not interacting with anybody. But then when I start to interact with you, or when I start to interact with this person, or when I start to interact with this group or in the world, then I'm not okay anymore. Then things arise, then I'm not okay. And what does that mean really, right? What does it mean? Like when we are alone, physically alone, not interacting, what changes? Is it really the person or the situation or people or the world? Or is it more what arises for us? And is it more that certain parts of our past, certain parts of our conditioning are not visible to us when we are alone and not interacting in the world? And in that way, we can say, relationship, whenever we say there's a blessing in relating and there's a challenge in relating, that challenge can really become an opportunity. Because when we are relational, we are becoming aware of parts of our past that we wouldn't be aware of otherwise. And that, of course, is true when, we are faced with challenges in the world, when we are interacting in the world. I don't want to focus on that today, but, that's true also, right? We are faced with parts of our past, parts of our conditioning, unfinished, unmet tendencies of the past that we are not aware of otherwise. So in that sense, that provides an incredible opportunity. So when I talk about relationships or relating, they are really three. There's so many things I could say, right? So many things, but there are three kinds of conditioning that arise for us when we relate. There is our general conditioning, period. It's going to be present, right? There's also the conditioning that is specifically related to relationships. So anything we have learned, any habits, any tendencies that we have acquired in terms of relating, good and bad and everything in between, right? That all is going to arise when we are relating. We have been speaking so much about trust, right? And surrender. And of course, all our issues around trust and around, whatever good and difficult we have experienced relationally so far is going to arise when we relate. And then over time also, if we are speaking about more personal relationships, relationships that go on over a certain period of time, we are going to have a conditioning that is specifically related to that particular relationship. I'm sure you are aware of that. Over time, we learn certain things, we develop certain habits. Again, good and bad, right? Good habits of understanding, how to be here with the other, and the challenging habits of when there's disagreements, when there are challenges, when we don't know how to move forward. That is also going to be part of that new learned conditioning, this relational conditioning. I think the most difficult part about relating, being relational with others, being in the world, or relating like at work or anywhere else, right? The most difficult part about relating is seeing the other or others, or the world for that matter, for where they are really at, for where it is really at. And what it means practically, it means we have to be able to be here, present to what is, right? To be able to do that. Because so much of the time, and that's also part of what I will be speaking about, is so much of the time, there's a projection going on in so many ways. Projection as, the movement away from our true nature. Projection as the unwillingness to be present to what is. Projection as the expectation, as projecting a certain image, certain idea, certain expectation of what relating or being relational is supposed to look like, or our unfulfilled needs and wishes and ideas. That all gets projected relationally. So it's the most difficult part really is to see the other or others or the world for where they are really at. And that's really key to relating, right? Because if you can be here, if you can see the other the way they are, that's we are stepping out of the past, we are stepping out of expectation, we are stepping out of, what we want, right? Like so often, like, wouldn't it be great if everybody just did what we want, right? We are stepping out of that and we are actually present to what is. And that's tremendous because that's reality, right? That's how it really is. And then, it's also very fulfilling, so much of the time, relationships can be challenging in certain ways. And what's really fulfilling in life in general, but also relationally and also in the world, is that ability to be here, be present, and to see things for what they are. Because then we can meet here, right? As we are meeting here, and that is really fulfilling, right? That is really rich. That is really, that's what being present really is, right? So I will be speaking about all that and so much more. There are so many other aspects of just relating itself, but then the whole piece of, engaging in the world. And also a very interesting piece of, what happens when challenging situations arise? What do we rely on internally? Are we relying on the past? Are we relying on the beliefs, on the ideas of the past? Or are we really deeply grounded in presence? And so I want to invite you to join me June 12th. And students that are new to me, that have not been in a program with me before, can come for free for this first week of the 3-week. I encourage everybody to come for all 3 weeks if you can. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing you there.